Episode 1, Chapter 1, An Isekai Gone Wild. The last thing I remember from my old life was the blinding headlights of a truck barreling toward me. Classic, right? Truck-kun strikes again. I'd read enough isekai light novels and watched enough anime to know exactly what was happening. The cosmic delivery service had just fast-tracked my soul to another world. What I didn't expect was to wake up in a marble palace that looked like it had been carved from clouds and starlight itself. My eyes snapped open, and I immediately knew something was wrong. Or rather, something was incredibly, impossibly right. The ceiling above me shimmered with an ethereal glow, constellations moving across it in real time. The bed beneath me felt like I was floating on the softest cloud imaginable. And when I sat up and looked down at my hands, they were smaller, younger, but somehow more perfect. I stumbled out of bed and caught my reflection in a polished bronze mirror across the room, and my jaw dropped. Staring back at me was the face of Satoru Gojo himself. Those impossibly bright blue eyes, the shock of white hair that somehow looked natural and stunning at the same time, the bone structure that could make Greek statues weep with envy. And I do mean Greek statues, because as I looked around the room more carefully, taking in the architecture, the divine craftsmanship, the way the very air seemed to hum with power, realization crashed over me like a tidal wave. I was on Mount Olympus. "No way," I whispered, my voice coming out younger but somehow more melodious than I remembered. "No freaking way." Before I could fully process this information, the door to my chamber burst open. And I do mean burst. The massive bronze doors flew wide with a dramatic flair that would make any theater director proud, and in strode two figures that could only be described as divine. The man was tall, easily 7 feet, with a chiseled physique that made bodybuilders look like they skipped leg day. His hair was dark as a storm cloud, and his eyes crackled with barely contained electricity. He wore robes of deep purple and gold, and when he moved, the air itself seemed to bow before him. A perfectly trimmed beard framed a face that was both stern and handsome, radiating authority that made every cell in my new body want to kneel. But it was the woman beside him who truly took my breath away. She was beauty personified, tall and regal, with flowing auburn hair that seemed to shimmer with its own light. Her eyes were a warm gold that somehow held both maternal love and divine majesty. Her dress looked like it had been woven from peacock feathers in starlight, shifting colors as she moved. A crown of golden flowers rested on her head, and the air around her practically vibrated with an aura of family, home, and fierce protection. "Our son awakens," the man boomed, his voice literally shaking the room. Thunder rumbled somewhere in the distance, as if the sky itself was celebrating. The woman was already rushing toward me, her face a mixture of joy and relief. "Perseus! Oh, my darling boy! You've been asleep for 3 days. We were so worried." Perseus. The name clicked into place in my mind, along with a flood of memories that weren't mine, yet somehow were. I was Perseus, son of Zeus and Hera. Not Percy Jackson, the son of Poseidon from the books I'd devoured in my previous life, but something entirely different, something that shouldn't exist. In the original Percy Jackson universe, Zeus and Hera didn't have demigod children together. Hera despised her husband's bastards, and Zeus was too busy having affairs with mortals to pay attention to his actual wife. But here I was, the impossible made flesh, the legitimate heir to the throne of Olympus. "Mom? Dad?" The words felt strange on my tongue, but the memories flooding my mind made them feel right. These were my parents. Somehow, impossibly, I had been reborn as their son. Hera reached me and pulled me into an embrace that was both gentle and overwhelming. The scent of flowers and home-baked bread washed over me, along with a power so immense it made my knees weak. My precious boy, you had us so frightened. The awakening of your divine blood can be traumatic, but you're through the worst of it now. Zeus approached more slowly, but his eyes were fixed on me with an intensity that made me feel like I was being examined under a microscope. You've grown stronger, son. I can feel it. Your divine nature has fully awakened. As if in response to his words, something impossible happened. A translucent blue screen materialized in the air directly in front of my face. My parents didn't react to it at all, continuing to fuss over me, which meant only I could see it. The screen was sleek and modern, like something out of a video game interface, completely at odds with the ancient Greek aesthetic of everything around me. Words began scrolling across it in a font that reminded me of every RPG I'd ever played. System initializing. Welcome, Perseus, son of Zeus and Hera. Godly system activated. Analyzing hosts. Analysis complete. My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. The classic isekai cheat ability. The system that would let me break the rules and become overpowered. I'd read about this 1,000 times, dreamed about it, but actually experiencing it was something else entirely. The screen flickered and new text appeared. Host status. Name: Perseus. Titles: Son of Zeus, Son of Hera, Heir of Olympus, the Half-Blood Prince. Divine heritage: 50% Zeus, 50% Hera. Current power levels: Demigod Tier 3. Current worshippers: 0. Work points: 0. System functions UN. Status screen. Work point accumulation. Divine store panel. Quest log. Skill tree. My mind raced. Worship points? A store panel? This was even better than I'd hoped. But before I could explore further, my mother's voice pulled me back to reality. Perseus, darling, are you listening? Hera cupped my face in her hands, her golden eyes searching mine with concern. You seem distracted. I'm fine, Mom, I said, forcing myself to focus on her instead of the glowing screen only I could see. Just still a bit disorientated from the awakening. Zeus nodded approvingly. That's to be expected. The merging of divine and mortal blood is no small thing, even for one as special as you. He placed a massive hand on my shoulder, and I felt power surge through me at the contact. You are unique, Perseus, the first true-born son of the king and queen of Olympus in millennia. Your destiny will be greater than any hero who came before. No pressure or anything. Your father is right, Hera said, smoothing my white hair with a tender gesture. Which is why we must be so careful with you. The world is dangerous, full of monsters and titans and primordial threats. Until you've been properly trained, until you're ready, we cannot risk anything happening to you. There it was, the overprotective parent's angle. I could already see where this was going. Zeus crossed his arms, his expression growing stern. You are to remain on Olympus until we deem otherwise. No trips to the mortal world, no unsupervised excursions, no contact with the other pantheons, and absolutely no involvement with Camp Half-Blood or any of the demigod conflicts below. My heart sank. So much for the adventure and freedom that were supposed to come with reincarnation. But father, I started. No buts, he interrupted, his voice taking on the tone of absolute command that had ruled the cosmos for eons. You are too precious to risk. You are our legacy, Perseus, the future of Olympus itself. Hera nodded in agreement, her grip on my shoulders tightening protectively. We've already lost so much over the millennia. We will not lose you too. You'll have everything you need here. The finest teachers, the best training, access to all the knowledge of Olympus. But you will be safe. Safe. The word felt like a cage door slamming shut. They continued talking, laying out a schedule of lessons and training that made my old school curriculum look like a vacation. Combat training with Ares, strategy lessons with Athena, music and poetry with Apollo, metalworking with Hephaestus. All of it supervised, controlled, and carefully managed by my overprotective divine parents. I nodded along, playing the role of the obedient son, but my mind was elsewhere. The system screen had minimized to a small icon in the corner of my vision, pulsing softly. I could feel it there, waiting for me to explore its functions. My golden ticket to power, hidden behind a user interface that only I could access. Finally, after what felt like hours of instructions and warnings and expressions of love that felt more like gilded chains, my parents left. Zeus had to deal with some crisis involving a dispute between Poseidon and a sea nymph, and Hera needed to attend to her duties as queen of the gods, but not before making me promise at least a dozen more times that I wouldn't leave my chambers without permission. The moment the door closed behind them, I rushed back to the mirror. "All right," I said to my reflection, to the impossibly handsome face that was now mine. "Let's see what you've got, system." The screen expanded instantly, filling my vision with options and menus that made my gamer heart sing. I focused on the Divine Store panel first, because honestly, that's what I was most excited about. The store interface opened like a cascading waterfall of possibilities, categories upon categories, each one more exciting than the last. Divine Store panel. Current worship points, 0. Categories: weapons, armor, epicities, techniques, items, bloodlines, companions. I clicked on weapons first, and my jaw dropped. The list was endless, literally endless. I could scroll forever and not reach the bottom, and the variety was insane. I saw swords from every anime I'd ever watched. I saw Marvel weapons like Mjolnir and Captain America's shield. I saw DC items like Wonder Woman's lasso and Green Lantern rings. I saw weapons from video games, from movies, from comics I'd only heard whispered about in online forums. Each item had a description and a price in worship points. Zangetsu, Bleach, Universe. The iconic blade of Ichigo Kurosaki grants immense spiritual pressure and the ability to fire devastating energy attacks. Cost: 50,000 worship points. MJO and IR, Marvel Universe. The Hammer of Thor, God of Thunder. Grants control over lightning and storms. User must be deemed worthy. Cost: 100,000 worship points. Excalibur, Arthurian legend. The legendary sword of King Arthur. Grants its wielder divine protection and enhanced combat abilities. Cost: 75,000 worship points. Master Bolt, Poseidon Universe. The weapon of Zeus himself. Wait, that's my dad's actual weapon. Can I buy my dad's weapon? That's weird. Cost: 150,000 work points. I laughed out loud at that last one. The system had a sense of humor, apparently. I switched to the Abilities tab, and things got even more interesting. Kamehameha, Dragon Ball Universe. The signature technique of the Turtle School. Fire concentrated energy blasts of devastating power. Cost 25,000 word points. Sharing Naruto Universe. The legendary dojutsu of the Uchiha clan grants enhanced perception, the ability to copy techniques, and eventually access to powerful genjutsu. Cost 80,000 word points. Infinity Jujutsu Kaisen Universe. The technique of Satoru Gojo creates infinite space between you and your target, making you essentially untouchable. 200,000 worship points. That last one made me grin. I already had Gojo's looks. Getting his signature technique would complete the package. But 200,000 worship points? That was going to take some serious work. I explored more of the store, finding everything from Iron Man's armor to the Speed Force, from Devil Fruits to Zanpakuto Spirits, from Sacred Gears to Infinity Stones. If I could imagine it, if it existed in any fictional universe from my old world, it was here. And I could buy it. If I had the worship points. That was the catch, of course. The system made the mechanics clear in a helpful tutorial window that popped up. Worship Point A Simulation. To gain worship points, you must gain followers. Anyone who believes in you, prays to you, or offers you reverence will grant you worship points based on the strength of their faith. A casual believer, 1 point per day. A devoted follower, 10 points per day. A fanatic worshipper, 100 points per day. A divine entity's worship, 1,000 points per day. Complete quests to gain bonus points and unlock new features. Current followers, 0. Daily income, 0 points. Build your pantheon. Gain your followers. Become the god you were meant to be. I stared at the screen, my mind already racing with possibilities. This changed everything. I wasn't just the son of Zeus and Hera, trapped in a gilded cage on Olympus. I was a player in the greatest game ever conceived, with a system that would let me become as powerful as I wanted, as long as I could gain followers. But therein lay the problem. My parents had just put me on lockdown. No trips to the mortal world where potential worshippers lived. No contact with Camp Half-Blood, where demigods who might revere me gathered. No adventures or quests that would let me prove myself worthy of devotion. How was I supposed to gain followers when I was confined to Olympus? As if reading my thoughts, the system chimed and a new window appeared. Quest impressions. Objective. Gain your first 10 followers among the gods and goddesses of Olympus. Reward, 1,000 worship points. Unlock of advanced store features. Time limit, none. Accept? Yes/no. I didn't hesitate. I selected yes. A slow smile spread across my face as I studied my reflection. If I couldn't go to the mortal world to gain followers, then I'd have to work with what I had. And what I had was access to the most powerful beings in the universe. The gods and goddesses of Olympus themselves. With this face, this charm that seemed to be part of my new divine nature, and the system backing me up, how hard could it be to make some goddesses interested in me? To gain their respect, their admiration, maybe even their worship? My parents wanted to keep me safe in a gilded cage. Fine, I'd play along. But I turned that cage into a throne room, and every god and goddess who met me would become a stepping stone to true power. I opened my chamber door and stepped out into the corridor. The marble halls of Olympus stretched before me, gleaming with divine light. Somewhere in the celestial palace were potential followers. Athena, goddess of wisdom. Artemis, the untouchable huntress. Hestia, the gentle goddess of the hearth. Even Aphrodite, if I played my cards right. Each one could grant me 1,000 worship points per day if I earned their devotion. The game had begun. I was Perseus, son of Zeus and Hera, heir to Olympus, and I had just been given the ultimate cheat code to power. My parents thought they could control my destiny, keep me safe and sequestered away from danger. They had no idea what they'd created. With the face of Gojo Satoru, a system that let me buy anything from across the multiverse, and a determination forged from 2 lifetimes, I was going to become something this universe had never seen before. Not just a hero, not just a god, a legend. And it all started today with one simple goal: make the goddesses of Olympus notice me. I thought about the quest log, the store panel glowing softly in my peripheral vision, and the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. Somewhere out there, beyond the safe confines of my parents' protection, adventures waited. Monsters to fight, heroes to lead, a world to save. But first, I needed power. And power, according to my system, came from worship. Time to introduce the Olympian pantheon to their newest member. Time to show them that the Half-Blood Prince was going to rewrite the rules of this entire universe. I caught my reflection in a polished shield hanging on the wall as I walked. Those bright blue eyes, that perfect face, the confidence that seemed to radiate from my very being. Yeah, I thought with a grin. This is going to be fun. The gilded cage might constrain my body, but my ambition, that was boundless. And with a system that rewarded followers with the power to purchase anything from Kamehameha waves to Captain America's shield, the sky wasn't even close to my limit. Mount Olympus had no idea what was about to hit it. Episode 1 of my new life had just begun, and I was already planning how to turn this power fantasy into reality. One goddess at a time. Episode 2. Chapter 2. The First Worshippers. The great throne room of Olympus was even more magnificent than I'd imagined. And trust me, I'd imagined it plenty. Between reading Rick Riordan's books in my past life and the inherited memories flooding my mind in this one, I thought I knew what to expect. But actually standing here, at the base of the steps leading up to 12 massive thrones arranged in a U-shape, each radiating power that made my teeth ache, that was something else entirely. The floor was polished marble that seemed to contain entire galaxies within its depths. Columns of pure white stone stretched up to a ceiling that showed the sky above. Except it wasn't just showing the sky, it was the sky. I could see constellations moving in real time, clouds drifting past, and occasionally the shooting stars streaking overhead. The air itself hummed with divine energy, thick enough that breathing felt like inhaling liquid starlight. And then there were the thrones. Each one was a masterpiece that would make mortal architects weep. Zeus's throne sat in the center, carved from dark marble with lightning bolts etched in gold that actually crackled with electricity. Beside it, Hera's throne was decorated with peacock feathers that shimmered with every color imaginable. Poseidon's looked like it had been carved from a single massive coral. Hades wasn't here. Right, he didn't get a throne at the main table. Talk about family drama. But it wasn't the architecture that had my heart hammering in my chest. It was the beings sitting on those thrones. The 12 Olympians. Well, 11, technically, since Hades was still sulking in the underworld, but still. The most powerful gods in the Greek pantheon, all gathered in one place, and all of them staring directly at me. No pressure. My father, Zeus, sat on his central throne looking every bit the king of the gods. He transformed into his full divine form for the occasion, about 15 feet tall, crackling with barely contained power, his eyes literally glowing with electricity. His presence alone was enough to make me want to kneel, and I was his son. Beside him, my mother Hera looked equally regal. Her beauty was almost painful to look at directly, like staring at the sun. She wore a crown woven from what looked like living flowers, and her dress seemed to be made from peacock feathers and starlight. Her expression was warm as she looked at me, but I could see the tension around her eyes. She was worried about how this would go. "Join the club, Mom." The other gods were arranged around them, and I recognized each one from my inherited memories and the books I'd devoured in my past life. Poseidon lounged on his coral throne, dressed in beach shorts and a Hawaiian shirt because apparently the god of the seas had a casual Friday dress code. His sea-green eyes studied me with undisguised curiosity. Makes sense. In the original timeline, Percy Jackson was his son. Now that role had been filled by me, son of his brother instead. The family dynamics here were going to be complicated. Demeter sat stiffly on a throne decorated with golden wheat, looking like she'd rather be literally anywhere else. Apparently, she only showed up to these meetings under protest. Her eyes swept over me once, then dismissed me. Great, already winning people over. Ares sprawled on a throne that looked like it had been forged from weapons and covered in blood, which, knowing Ares, it probably had been. He was huge, muscular, covered in scars, and grinning at me like he was imagining all the ways he could beat me up in training. His eyes held a challenge that made it clear he didn't care that I was the heir to Olympus. If anything, that made him want to fight me more. Athena sat with perfect posture on a throne carved from white marble and decorated with owls. She was beautiful in that classical Greek way, gray eyes that seemed to see everything, dark hair pulled back in a practical style, an expression of cool intelligence that gave nothing away. Those gray eyes were fixed on me with an intensity that made me feel like I was a particularly interesting puzzle she intended to solve. Apollo practically glowed on his throne of gold in sunlight. He was wearing sunglasses indoors because of course he was, and his golden hair was styled perfectly. He shot me a grin and a wink that somehow managed to be both friendly and competitive at the same time. Message received. The god of music and poetry was already measuring me up as potential competition for the spotlight. Artemis sat as far from her twin brother as possible, on a throne made of silver and decorated with crescent moons. She was young, maybe 12 or 13 in appearance, with auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail and silver eyes that were currently boring into me with suspicion. The goddess of the hunt, eternal maiden, protector of young women. Yeah, she was definitely not going to be easy to win over, but according to my quest, she was one of my primary targets. Hephaestus hunched on a throne made of metal and gears that actually moved and clicked. He was the only god who looked uncomfortable being here, his scarred face turned slightly away, his clubbed foot resting on a lower step. But his dark eyes were sharp as they examined me, probably already calculating what kind of weapon I'd need and how he'd forge it. Aphrodite reclined on what could only be described as the most extra throne I'd ever seen. It looked like it had been carved from rose quartz and mother of pearl, decorated with shells and flowers, and it actually seemed to glow with soft pink light. The goddess of beauty herself was, well, describing Aphrodite is basically impossible. She was beauty. Every concept of attractiveness, of desire, of love and lust and romance, all compressed into one being. Her appearance seemed to shift slightly every time I looked at her, as if she was showing me exactly what I found most attractive. Currently, she looked like a perfect blend of every crush I'd ever had, mixed with some celebrities from my old world, all wrapped up in a dress that left very little to the imagination. She was looking at me with undisguised interest, a smile playing on her lips that promised both wonderful and terrible things. Hermes perched on his throne like he was about to take off at any moment. He had an easy grin, a mischievous glint in his eyes, and he was wearing a business suit with winged shoes. The god of travelers and thieves gave me a friendly nod, apparently the most chill of all the Olympians so far. Dionysus looked bored out of his mind. He was dressed in a tiger print Hawaiian shirt. Apparently, Hawaiian shirts were big on Olympus, and held a wine glass filled with what was probably not wine, since Zeus had restricted him to Diet Coke as punishment. His bloodshot eyes swept over me with disinterest. Clearly, another demigod adjacent being wasn't enough to hold his attention. And then, sitting quietly on the smallest throne near the hearth, was Hestia. The goddess of the hearth and home had given up her throne at the main table to Dionysus eons ago, but she still attended these gatherings. She looked like a young girl, maybe 8 years old, with kind brown eyes and a warm smile. Flames flickered in the hearth beside her, casting a gentle light that seemed separate from the grandeur of the rest of the room. When her eyes met mine, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. She nodded to me, a small gesture of encouragement that somehow made my racing heart slow just a fraction. That was my audience, the gods of Olympus, the beings who shaped the fate of the world, and I was about to ask them to worship me. No big deal. Lords and ladies of Olympus. Zeus's voice boomed through the throne room like thunder, making the very air vibrate. We have called this council to formally introduce our son, Perseus, to the court. As you all know, he is the first true-born child of myself and Queen Hera in many centuries. He is the heir to the throne of Olympus, and as such, he will one day rule alongside us. Murmurs rippled through the assembled gods. I caught Poseidon leaning over to whisper something to Hermes, who grinned. Athena's expression remained neutral, but I saw her eyes narrow slightly, reassessing. Ares just looked annoyed, as if the idea of someone else being important offended him personally. Perseus, Hera's voice was softer than Zeus's, but no less commanding. Step forward and greet the Olympian Council. This was it, my debut, the moment that would set the tone for everything that followed. I took a deep breath and walked forward, climbing the steps toward the center of the U-shaped arrangement of thrones. Every eye in the room was on me, and I could feel the weight of their attention like a physical pressure. Divine beings, each one capable of erasing me from existence with a thought, all focused entirely on me. The system chimed softly in my mind, visible only to me. Quest Upchan. First impressions. Current followers, 0 tenths. Tip: use your divine charm and natural charisma to make a strong impression. Confidence is key. Thanks for the pep talk, system. Real helpful. But as I reached the top of the steps and turned to face the assembled gods, something shifted inside me. Maybe it was the divine blood running through my veins. Maybe it was the memories of my past life, where I'd consumed enough power fantasy content to know how these scenes were supposed to go. Or maybe it was just the fact that I had the face of Satoru Gojo and a system that could let me buy literal superpowers if I played my cards right. Whatever it was, I felt confidence surge through me. I was Perseus, son of Zeus and Hera, heir to Olympus. And I was about to make damn sure everyone remembered it. Lords and ladies of Olympus, I said, my voice carrying through the throne room with a clarity that surprised even me. I am Perseus, and I am honored to stand before you today. I turned slowly, making eye contact with each god in turn. I had learned in my past life that eye contact was crucial for making impressions, and here it felt even more important. These were beings who could read souls, who had existed for millennia. If I showed weakness or uncertainty, they'd see right through me. So I didn't. I met each gaze steadily, a slight smile on my lips, projecting every ounce of confidence I could muster. I know that my existence is unusual, I continued. A child born of Zeus and Hera, when such births are rare in our time. Some of you might wonder why I'm here, what purpose I serve, what role I'll play in the future of Olympus. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Apollo was leaning forward now, his sunglasses pushed down to reveal golden eyes fixed on me with interest. Athena's expression remained neutral, but I caught the slightest tilt of her head, a sign she was listening carefully. Even Artemis had stopped glaring and started actually paying attention. I don't have all the answers yet, I admitted, and I saw a few surprised expressions at my honesty. I'm still learning, still growing into my power. But I can promise you this, I will not waste the gift I've been given. I will train, I will learn, and I will prove myself worthy of the legacy I've inherited. Ares snorted. Pretty words, princeling, but words don't mean much. Can you back them up? Several gods shifted uncomfortably. Apparently, interrupting formal introductions wasn't great etiquette, but I just smiled. I'd been waiting for someone to challenge me. Ares was predictable like that. I'm the son of Zeus, Lord Ares, I said calmly. The blood of the king of the gods runs through my veins. I'd be happy to demonstrate my abilities whenever you'd like to schedule a training session. That got a few reactions. Poseidon chuckled. Apollo grinned like he just witnessed the start of an entertaining show. Athena's lips curved in what might have been the ghost of a smile. And Ares? He leaned back on his throne and laughed, a booming sound that was somehow both threatening and approving. I like this kid, Ares announced to the room. He's got guts. Stupid, but guts. Yeah, we'll schedule that training session, Princeling. Let's see if you can last 5 minutes. I look forward to it, Lord Ares, I said, still maintaining that confident smile even though internally I was screaming. What had I just agreed to? Training with Ares, the god of war? I was going to die. Or at least wish I was dead. But hey, no risk, no reward, right? The system chimed again. Impressive! I has taken notice of you. Potential follower identified. Continue to demonstrate your worth to increase conversion chance. If I may, a feminine voice cut through the murmurs, clear and intelligent. Athena stood from her throne, her gray eyes locked on me. I have a question for the young prince. Oh no. If Ares was the god of direct physical challenges, Athena was the goddess of intellectual ones. And based on the slight smile on her face, she was about to put me through my paces. Of course, Lady Athena, I said, inclining my head respectfully. I'm at your disposal. You speak of proving yourself worthy, Athena said, descending from her throne with fluid grace. She moved like a warrior, each step purposeful and precise. But worthiness must be measured against something. Tell me, Perseus, what do you believe makes a good ruler? What qualities should the heir of Olympus possess? The throne room went silent. Every god was watching now, waiting to see how I'd answer. This wasn't just small talk. This was a test. Athena was the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare. She advised heroes, guided kings, and shaped the fate of nations. If I gave a shallow or thoughtless answer, I'd lose her respect forever. But if I impressed her, well, that would be worth 1,000 worship points. I took a moment to think, not rushing my answer. Another thing I'd learned. Smart people don't rush to answer difficult questions. They think first. The good ruler, I began slowly, needs to balance many qualities that often seem contradictory. Strength, but also wisdom. The ability to make hard decisions, but also the compassion to understand how those decisions affect others. courage in the face of danger, but also the intelligence to know when fighting isn't the answer. I met Athena's gray eyes directly. But more than anything, I think a good ruler needs to understand that their power exists to serve those under their protection, not the other way around. The throne of Olympus isn't a prize to be won or a privilege to be enjoyed. It's a responsibility, a burden, and whoever sits on it must be willing to bear that burden for the good of all, gods, demigods, and mortals alike. The silence that followed my words was different this time, heavier, more thoughtful. Athena studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a slight curve of her lips, but from the goddess of wisdom, it felt like high praise. An interesting answer, she said. Wisdom and understanding beyond your years. Perhaps there is more to you than just a pretty face and a divine bloodline, Perseus. Quest obtained. First impressions. Athena impressed. Potential follower identified. Current progress. 2/10. God showing strong interest. Though I note, Athena continued, returning to her throne, that you speak of balance and responsibility, yet you challenged Ares to a fight within minutes of meeting him. Perhaps your actions don't quite match your philosophy yet? A few gods chuckled at that, and I felt my cheeks heat slightly. Damn, she had me there. I may have let my pride get the better of me in that moment, I admitted. I'm still learning, but isn't that part of the point? To acknowledge our flaws so we can work on them? Athena's smile widened just a fraction. Indeed it is. Self-awareness is the first step to wisdom. You may yet prove to be a worthwhile student, young prince. Athena's interest increase. Keep this up and she'll be your first divine follower. Before I could respond, another voice cut in. All this talk of wisdom and responsibility is giving me a headache. Aphrodite rose from her throne in a movement that could only be described as poetic. Let's discuss something more interesting. Perseus, darling, come here. Oh no! Oh no, no, no! The goddess of love and beauty descended from her throne and glided toward me. And I do mean glided. Her feet barely seemed to touch the ground. The air around her shimmered with rose-colored light, and I caught the scent of flowers and vanilla and something else. Something that made my teenage divine brain short-circuit a little. She stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back slightly to meet her eyes. This close, her beauty was almost overwhelming. My divine heritage gave me some resistance to godly powers, but Aphrodite's presence was like trying to stare into the sun. Every instinct told me to look away, but I forced myself to maintain eye contact. My, she purred, reaching up to touch my white hair. Her fingers brushed against my cheek, and I felt warmth spread through me at the contact. Hera, you didn't mention how absolutely gorgeous your son turned out. Those eyes, that face, and that confidence. You're going to break so many hearts, little prince. Thank you, Lady Aphrodite, I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. Behind her, I could see Hera's expression darkening dangerously. Apparently, having the goddess of love flirt with her son in front of the entire Olympian Council wasn't high on Mom's list of acceptable activities. Aphrodite laughed. I sound like wind chimes. Oh, don't look so nervous. I'm just having a little fun. Though I must say, you're quite interesting. I can feel it, the pull. You have a certain magnetism about you. Charisma. The kind that draws people in, makes them want to follow you, believe in you. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow still carried to every corner of the throne room. The kind that could make goddesses fall for you if you're not careful. Or if you are careful, she added with a wink, stepping back. I'll be watching your progress with great interest, Perseus. Don't disappoint me. Aphrodite intrigued. Warning. Goddess of love has taken a personal interest in you. This could be very good, or very bad depending on how you handle it. Thanks for the incredibly helpful warning system. Aphrodite returned to her throne, leaving me standing there trying to remember how breathing worked. Several gods were trying not to laugh. Hermes was grinning ear to ear. Apollo had his phone out and was probably texting everyone he knew about the show. And Hera was glaring at Aphrodite with enough intensity to melt steel. Anyone else want to interrogate my son? Zeus's voice carried a note of warning. Or can we move on to the actual purpose of this council? I have a question, a young voice said, sharp and clear. Artemis stood from her throne, her silver eyes fixed on me with an expression I couldn't quite read. The goddess of the hunt, the eternal maiden, the protector of young girls and nature itself. She looked younger than most of the other Olympians, by choice, appearing as a 12-year-old girl. But there was nothing childish about the way she carried herself or the intensity in her gaze. She descended from her throne and approached me, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. When she stopped a few feet away, I noticed she was exactly my height in this form, eye to eye, equal to equal. You speak of being worthy, Artemis said, her voice cutting through the lingering tension from Aphrodite's display. Of proving yourself. But your father is Zeus, the king of gods, who has proven himself unworthy 1,000 times over with his infidelities and his pride. I heard Hera make a small sound of approval. Apparently, calling out Zeus's flaws was always welcome in her book. Your mother is Hera, who has persecuted countless innocent children for the crimes of their fathers, Artemis continued. And now it was Zeus making disgruntled noises. So tell me, Perseus, son of the king and queen of dysfunction, why should we believe you will be any different? What makes you think you can break the cycle? Dead silence. This was the real test. Not Ares' physical challenge, or Athena's intellectual puzzle, or Aphrodite's seduction. This was Artemis asking the fundamental question. Was I just another entitled divine prince? Or was I actually worth believing in? I looked at the goddess of the hunt, at those silver eyes that had witnessed humanity's best and worst for millennia. She'd protected countless girls from men who would harm them. She'd seen the worst that male gods and mortals had to offer, and now she was asking me to prove I was different. I can't promise I'll break the cycle, I said honestly. I'd be lying if I said I knew for certain I wouldn't make the same mistakes they did. I'm young, I'm inexperienced, and I'm going to mess up. Probably a lot. Artemis's expression didn't change, but she tilted her head slightly. Listening. But here's what I can promise, I continued. I can promise that I'll try. That I'll do my best to learn from their mistakes instead of repeating them. That I'll treat others with respect, regardless of whether they're gods or mortals or anywhere in between. That I'll take responsibility for my actions instead of blaming others or making excuses. I took a breath, choosing my next words carefully. You're right that my parents have made mistakes. Huge ones. But they're also trying to be better, at least with me. My mother isn't persecuting anyone's children anymore. My father is actually being faithful to his wife for once. Maybe I'm the result of them trying to break their own cycle. And if they can try to be better, then I can damn well try too. Artemis stared at me for a long moment. The throne room was so quiet I could hear the crackling of Hestia's hearth fire. Then, slowly, the goddess of the hunt nodded. We shall see, Perseus. Time will tell if your actions match your words. But, and here, the faintest hint of a smile touched her lips. I find myself hoping they do. The world could use a male god who actually keeps his promises for once. She turned and walked back to her throne, and I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Artemis curiously approving. Significant achievement. The maiden goddess doesn't hate you. This is rarer than you think. Potential follower identified. Well said, young one. A gentle voice spoke, and I turned to see Hestia smiling at me from her place by the hearth. Your honesty does you credit. So many would have made grand promises they couldn't keep. But you spoke truth, and truth is the foundation of trust. The goddess of the hearth stood and walked toward me. Unlike the other goddesses, there was no seduction in her approach, no challenge, no test, just warmth and acceptance. When she reached me, she placed a small hand on my arm, and I felt peace wash through me. The hearth welcomes you, Perseus, Hestia said softly. Not because of your parentage, or your power, or your potential, but because of your heart. Remember that as you grow and gain strength. The heart must always come first. Hestia accepts you. The goddess of the hearth has recognized her sincerity. Follower acquired 1/10. Wait, what? I focused on the system notification, and it expanded. Congratulations, Hestia, goddess of the earth, has become your first follower. +1. 000 Worsh. Points daily. Followers. 1/10. Holy shit. It actually worked. I had my first follower. One of the oldest and most respected goddesses on Olympus had just pledged her faith in me. Thank you, Lady Hestia, I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. I'll do my best to prove worthy of your trust. She smiled, patted my arm like a grandmother sending her grandson off to school, and returned to her hearth. But I caught several other gods looking at her in surprise. Hestia didn't give her blessing lightly. If she had accepted me, then maybe there was more to the new prince than met the eye. The rest of the council proceeded more smoothly after that. Poseidon stood and made a speech about being happy to have a nephew he could actually get along with, unlike his brother. Hermes cracked some jokes that actually made me laugh. Phasis grunted something about coming to his forge later so he could measure me for proper armor. Even Demeter nodded at me once, which I think was about as close to approval as I was going to get from her. Dionysus remained bored throughout the entire thing, but I caught him watching me once or twice with slightly more interest than before. Maybe I'd won him over just by not being as dull as he'd expected. By the time Zeus officially concluded the council, I was exhausted. Mentally, emotionally, even physically. Maintaining that level of confidence and charm in front of the 12 Olympians for over an hour was like running a marathon in my mind. But as the gods began to disperse, I felt a surge of satisfaction. I'd done it. I'd made my debut, impressed the court, and gained my first follower. And based on the system notifications quietly pinging in my peripheral vision, I had several more gods on the verge of becoming believers. Perseus! Athena's voice cut through my thoughts. The goddess of wisdom had approached while I was lost in contemplation. Up close, she was even more striking than from a distance. Those gray eyes seemed to see straight through me. Walk with me. I'd like to continue our earlier conversations. Quest OPE furtivity detected. Athena requests private audience. Accept to significantly increase follower conversion chance. Of course, Lady Athena, I said, falling into step beside her as she led me away from the throne room. Behind us, I caught Artemis watching our departure with an unreadable expression. And near the hearth, Hestia smiled knowingly. The game had truly begun. I had my first follower, several potential converts, and the attention of some of the most powerful goddesses in existence. My parents wanted to keep me in a gilded cage, safe and protected. But they made one critical mistake. They'd put me in a cage filled with gods and goddesses who could become my followers. Who could, with their divine worship, give me enough power to eventually break free and forge my own destiny. As I walked beside Athena through the halls of Olympus, the system chimed one more time. Cust obtain first impressions. Current progress, 1/10 followers acquid. Potential followers identified, 6. Estimated time to complete quest, 2-3 days. Recommendation: continue building relationships with Athena, Artemis, and Hestia. Secondary targets: Artemis and Remus show strong interest. I smiled to myself as we turned a corner, leaving the throne room behind. 2-3 days to complete a quest that would give me 1,000 worship points and unlock advanced store features. Then I could start shopping for real power. Maybe something to help me survive that training session with Ares that I so stupidly agreed to. But that was a problem for future me. Present me had a goddess of wisdom to impress and a reputation to build. The Half-Blood Prince had officially entered the game, and I was playing to win. Episode 3. Chapter 3. Hearth and Hunt. My conversation with Athena had lasted nearly 2 hours. We'd walk through the gardens of Olympus, discussing everything from military strategy to philosophy to the nature of wisdom itself. The goddess of wisdom had tested me with increasingly complex questions, probing my knowledge, my reasoning, my ability to think several steps ahead. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. By the end of it, I could tell I'd impressed her. Not enough to gain her as a follower yet, but enough that she'd invited me to visit her library, apparently one of the greatest repositories of knowledge in existence. The system had pinged with notifications about increased conversion chances, and I had felt a surge of satisfaction. But now, as I made my way back through the palace halls, that satisfaction was mingled with exhaustion. Mental fatigue from hours of intellectual sparring with one of the smartest beings in the universe. The kind of tired that came from keeping your brain running at full speed without a break. I needed to rest. Or at least, I needed to find somewhere quiet where I could just exist for a while without having to prove myself or charm anyone or carefully navigate divine politics. As if reading my thoughts, I found my feet carrying me toward the central hearth of Olympus. Every Greek home had a hearth, a sacred fire that represented the heart of the household. Olympus was no different, except on a much grander scale. The central hearth was located in a circular chamber near the base of the palace, a quiet place that most gods passed by without much thought. But for those who knew its value, it was a sanctuary. I pushed open the bronze doors and stepped inside. The chamber was warm and peaceful. A large circular hearth dominated the center of the room, flames dancing within it in shades of orange and gold. The fire never went out, never needed fuel, and never produced smoke. It simply existed, eternal and constant. The walls were lined with comfortable cushions and low benches, and the ceiling was open to the sky, letting in natural light that mingled with the firelight. And sitting by the hearth, tending the flames with a simple iron poker, was Hestia. The goddess looked up as I entered, and her face broke into a warm smile. Perseus, I wondered if you might find your way here eventually. Lady Hestia, I said, bowing slightly. Even though she'd already accepted me as a follower, respect felt important. I hope I'm not intruding. Never, she said, gesturing to a cushion beside her. The hearth is open to all who seek its comfort. Come, sit. You look like you could use a moment of peace. I didn't need to be told twice. I crossed the chamber and sank down onto the cushion beside her, feeling the warmth of the fire wash over me. It was different from normal fire. This warmth didn't just heat my skin. It seeped deeper, warming something inside me that I hadn't even realized was cold. Your meeting with Athena went well, I take it? Hestia asked, her voice gentle. I think so, I said. She's intense, but in a good way. I feel like I learned more in 2 hours with her than I did in years of school I caught myself before I said past life in my studies. If Hestia noticed my slip, she didn't mention it. She just nodded, poking at the fire to encourage a log that didn't actually exist to burn brighter. Athena has always been brilliant, sometimes too brilliant for her own good. She forgets that not everyone can keep up with the speed of her thoughts. I barely could, I admitted. By the end, I felt like my brain was going to melt. Hestia laughed, a soft sound that reminded me of crackling firewood. Then you did well. Athena only pushes those she thinks can handle it. If she deemed you incapable, she would have dismissed you within the first 5 minutes. That was oddly reassuring. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the flames dance. This close to Hestia, I could feel her divine presence, but it was nothing like the overwhelming power of Zeus or the seductive allure of Aphrodite. Hestia's presence was warm, gentle, safe, like coming home after a long journey, like a hug from someone who genuinely cared about you. May I ask you something, Lady Hestia? I said after a while. Of course. And, please, just Hestia is fine when we're alone. I've never been one for excessive formality. Hestia, then, I said, trying out the name. It felt strange to address a goddess so casually, but she'd asked. Back in the throne room, you said you accepted me because of my heart. What did you mean by that? She was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. The firelight played across her young features, and I was reminded that despite her appearance, this was one of the oldest goddesses in existence, older than Zeus himself. She'd been there at the beginning, when the world was young and the Titans still ruled. The heart, she said slowly, is what makes us who we are. Not our power, not our titles, not our achievements. The heart is the core of our being. It's what we value, what we love, what we're willing to sacrifice for. She turned to look at me, her brown eyes reflecting the firelight. When you spoke in the throne room, I could see your heart. You weren't just saying pretty words to impress the council. You meant them. You truly want to be better than your parents' worst qualities. You truly want to help people, to prove yourself worthy not for glory, but because you believe it's the right thing to do. I felt my cheeks heat, and not from the fire. I don't know if I'm as noble as all that. No one is purely noble, Hestia said with a small smile. We all have selfish desires, petty thoughts, moments of weakness. But the heart I speak of isn't about perfection. It's about intention, about what drives you when everything else is stripped away. She reached over and placed her hand over my chest, right above my heart. Her touch was warm, comforting. You have a good heart, Perseus, a strong heart, one that's been through pain and knows the value of kindness because of it. That's rare, especially among gods. For a moment, I wondered if she somehow knew about my reincarnation, about the life I'd lived before this one, the death I'd experienced, the second chance I'd been given. But if she did, she gave no sign of it. She simply smiled and withdrew her hand. Thank you, I said quietly. That means more than you know. You're welcome, dear one. She returned her attention to the fire. Now, tell me, what do you see when you look into the flames? I looked at the dancing fire, watching the way the flames flickered and swayed. I see warmth, safety, home. Good, Hestia said approvingly. That's what the hearth is meant to provide. But look deeper. The flames can show you more if you let them. I focused on the fire, really focused, letting my vision blur slightly. And slowly, images began to form in the flames. I saw Camp Half-Blood, the demigod training ground I'd read about in the books. I saw cabins arranged in a U-shape, demigods training with weapons, capture the flag games in the woods. I saw faces I didn't recognize yet, but somehow knew I would meet. The future? I asked. Possibilities, Hestia corrected. The flames show what might be, not what must be. They show the paths available to you, the choices you'll face. The future is never set, Perseus. It's shaped by the decisions we make in each moment. The images shifted. Now I saw darkness, something ancient and terrible stirring in the depths. I saw shadows that moved with malevolent intelligence, creatures that shouldn't exist crawling up from places best left undisturbed. I saw a war coming, one that would make the battles of the past look small by comparison. That's less encouraging, I muttered. The flame shows both light and dark, Hestia said. Both hope and danger. The world is entering a time of great change, Perseus. The old order is shifting. New powers are rising, and old threats are waking. You are part of that change, whether you wish to be or not. Great. No pressure. The images faded, and the flames returned to their normal dancing patterns. I sat back, processing what I'd seen. A war, darkness, danger, but also hope, community, purpose. My future was going to be complicated, to say the least. I won't lie to you, Hestia said, her voice taking on a more serious tone. The path ahead of you is fraught with danger. Your parents are right to worry, even if their methods of protection are excessive. There are forces in this world that would see you dead simply for existing. Your unique nature, your divine heritage, it makes you a threat to certain entities, a symbol of hope to others. She looked at me, and for a moment I saw ancient wisdom in those young eyes. But I also know that you cannot grow if you remain in a cage, golden or otherwise. You need to experience the world, to face challenges, to make mistakes and learn from them. That is how heroes are forged. That is how gods become truly divine. Are you saying I should defy my parents? I asked carefully. I'm saying, Hestia said with a slight smile, that there is a difference between reckless rebellion and necessary growth. Your parents fear losing you. That fear makes them overprotective. But fear is not a good foundation for any relationship, even between gods. She poked the fire again, and the flames flared briefly. When the time comes, you will have to make a choice. To remain safe and constrained, or to risk danger for the sake of freedom and growth. I cannot tell you which path is right, but I can tell you that the hearth will always be here for you. No matter which path you choose, you will always have a home to return to. I felt emotion well up in my chest. In my past life, I'd had parents who loved me, but our relationship had been distant. Modern, busy, distracted by work and technology and the thousand other things that pulled families apart. Here, in this new life, I had Zeus and Hera who loved me so intensely it bordered on smothering. But Hestia? Hestia offered something different. Unconditional acceptance. No expectations, no demands, no test to pass. Just warmth and understanding and a promise that I would always be welcome. Thank you, Hestia, I said, my voice thick, for accepting me, For this. For everything. She reached over and squeezed my hand. You are family, Perseus. Not because of your blood or your power, but because you sat with me by the hearth and showed me your true self. That makes you one of mine. And I protect what is mine. The system chimed softly. Hestia's bond deepened. Follower loyalty increased to maximum. Special benefit unlocked. Hearth's blessing. You now have a permanent sanctuary. No matter where you are, you can call upon the warmth of the hearth to find peace and restore your energy. Additional benefit. Hestia will actively support your goals and protect you from harm when possible. I blinked at the notification. A permanent sanctuary? Active protection from one of the oldest goddesses? That was way more than just worship points. This was a genuine bond, a real relationship that transcended the system's game mechanics. Maybe that was the point. The system gave me the framework, but the actual connections, the real relationships, those I had to build myself. And they would be worth far more than any points or purchase powers. We sat by the hearth for another hour, talking about small things. She told me stories about the old days, when the world was young and the gods first came to power. I told her about my interests, my thoughts, my hopes for the future. It was comfortable, easy, like talking to a favorite grandmother who actually listened and cared. Eventually, though, I knew I had to leave. As much as I wanted to stay in this peaceful bubble forever, I had other goddesses to meet, other relationships to build. My quest wasn't going to complete itself. Thank you for this, I said as I stood to leave. I didn't realize how much I needed it until I was here. The hearth has a way of giving us what we need, when we need it, Hestia said, smiling up at me. Come back whenever you wish, Perseus. Day or night, you're always welcome here. I bowed to her, more deeply than before, showing the genuine respect and affection I felt. Then I turned and made my way back to the bronze doors. As I stepped out into the hallway, I felt refreshed in a way that had nothing to do with physical rest. My mind was clearer, my emotions more settled. The warmth of the hearth stayed with me, a gentle presence in the back of my awareness. I checked the system notifications, scrolling through the updates from my time with Hestia. My worship points were accumulating nicely, 1,000 per day from her alone. But more importantly, I had a genuine ally now. Someone who believed in me not because of my charm or my potential power, but because she'd seen my heart and deemed it worthy. That felt good, really good. But I couldn't rest on my laurels. I still needed 9 more followers to complete my quest. And according to the system, my next best target was... There you are. I looked up to find Artemis standing in the hallway, arms crossed, silver eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made me want to take a step back. The goddess of the hunt was no longer in her throne room attire. Now she wore practical hunting garb, a silver parka, dark pants, boots built for running through rough terrain. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she had a silver bow slung over her shoulder. She looked like she was ready to either hunt something or shoot me, possibly both. Lady Artemis, I said, trying for a friendly smile. What a pleasant surprise. Is it? She asked, raising an eyebrow. You've been making the rounds, haven't you? Impressing Athena with your wisdom, charming Hestia by the hearth. I hear Aphrodite is already planning your wedding to half the goddesses on Olympus. I winced. That last part is definitely not my doing. Isn't it? Artemis pushed off from the wall she'd been leaning against and approached me. You have to know the effect you have, Perseus. That face, that charm, that whole air of Olympus thing. Gods and goddesses are falling over themselves to get your attention. She stopped directly in front of me, looking up into my eyes. Even in her young form, there was nothing childish about her gaze. Those silver eyes held the wisdom of millennia and the ferocity of a predator. "So here's my question," she said. "What do you want from me? What's your angle? Because everyone has one, and I'd rather you be honest about it now than try to manipulate me later." I took a breath, considering my response carefully. This was Artemis, the goddess who'd sworn off men entirely after witnessing too many of their worst qualities. She'd seen Zeus's infidelities, Apollo's arrogance, Ares' brutality. She'd watched male heroes fall to hubris time and time again. Convincing her to trust me, much less become a follower, was going to be the hardest challenge yet. But I'd promised Hestia I would always lead with my heart. So that's what I'd do. "Honestly," I said, "I want you to believe in me. Not romantically," I added quickly, seeing her eyes narrow. "I know about your oath, and I respect it completely. I mean, I want you to believe that I can be better than the male gods you've known. That I can be someone worth following, worth supporting. Someone who won't let you down, or prove your worst assumptions about men correct." Artemis stared at me for a long moment. That's quite a claim. I know, and I also know I haven't proven it yet. Words are easy. Actions are what matter. I met her gaze steadily. "So I'm not asking you to trust me right now. I'm asking for the chance to earn that trust over time." She tilted her head slightly, studying me like I was a particularly interesting specimen. "You're different from what I expected. More genuine. Most male gods would have tried to flirt with me by now, despite knowing about my oath. Or they'd have made some crude comment or looked at me the wrong way. I was raised better than that," I said. "My mother would smite me where I stood if I disrespected a goddess's boundaries. And beyond that, I actually do respect your oath. The world needs goddesses like you, Artemis. Protectors of those who can't protect themselves. Examples of strength that doesn't rely on male approval or validation." Something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe. Or cautious hope. "Pretty words again," she said, but her tone was less confrontational now. "Let's see if you can back them up. Come with me." "Come with you where?" She turned and started walking down the hall without waiting for my response. "I'm going hunting. You can join me, if you're not too tired from your intellectual sparring with Athena and your heart-to-heart with Hestia. Consider it a test." The system chimed. Questo opportunity detected. Artemis offers hunting challenge. Accept to significantly increase follower conversion chance. Warning: Artemis will be evaluating your character, not just your skills. Proceed with authority. I hurried to catch up with her. "I'd be honored to join you, Lady Artemis. Though I should warn you, I've never actually been hunting before." She glanced at me with something that might have been amusement. "I know. That's why this will be interesting." We walked through the palace and out into the grounds beyond. The architecture of Olympus was impossible by mortal standards. Buildings that shouldn't exist. Spaces that were larger on the inside than the outside. Gardens that contained entire ecosystems. And at the far edge of the divine realm, there were wild places. Forests that stretched on forever. Mountains that touched the sky. Rivers that flowed upward. Artemis led me into one of the forests, moving with the easy grace of someone who had spent eternity among the trees. The moment we crossed into the tree line, everything changed. The air became cooler, filled with the scent of pine and earth. The sounds of the palace faded, replaced by birdsong and rustling leaves. Dappled sunlight filtered through the canopy above. "These are the eternal forests," Artemis said, her voice quieter now, more reverent. a piece of true wilderness preserved on Olympus. Nothing here is tamed or controlled. The animals are real, the danger is real. It's one of the few places on Olympus where I can truly be myself. I looked around in wonder. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way, so different from the orderly perfection of the palace. Artemis reached into a hollow tree and pulled out a bow, simple wood, unadorned, but I could feel the power thrumming through it. She offered it to me. Have you ever used a bow? Not really, I admitted, taking the weapon. It was heavier than I expected, solid and real in a way that made me very aware of my lack of experience. Then, today, you learn. She pulled an arrow from a quiver that definitely hadn't been there a moment ago and showed me how to nock it. Feet shoulder width apart, elbow up, draw back to your anchor point, that's the corner of your mouth. Sight down the arrow, breathe out slowly and release. I tried to follow her instructions, feeling incredibly awkward. The bowstring bit into my fingers. My elbow kept dropping. When I finally released the arrow, it went wide, disappearing into the underbrush somewhere off to my left. That was terrible, Artemis said bluntly. Yeah, I got that impression when I completely missed the tree I was aiming at. To my surprise, she smiled. Actually smiled. At least you're honest about it. Most male gods would have made excuses, or blamed the equipment, or tried to pretend they'd actually hit what they were aiming for. She stepped up beside me, adjusting my stance with quick, efficient movements. Again, and this time, don't think so much. Feel it. The bow is an extension of your body. The arrow is an extension of your will. Stop trying to force it and just let it happen. I nocked another arrow, trying to internalize her instructions. This time, when I drew back the bowstring, I focused on what I wanted instead of how to do it. I wanted the arrow to fly true. I wanted to prove I could learn. I wanted Artemis to see that I was worth teaching. The arrow released with a soft twang. It flew straight this time, embedding itself in a tree trunk about 30 feet away. Not a bullseye by any means, but actually hitting the target I was aiming for. Better, Artemis said with an approving nod. You learn quickly. That's good. Most skills in life come down to the willingness to learn and the humility to accept instruction. We spent the next hour like that, Artemis teaching me the basics of archery, occasionally stopping to point out animal tracks or explain something about the forest. She was a patient teacher, correcting my mistakes without mockery, praising my improvements without exaggeration. And slowly, I began to understand what drew people to follow Artemis. It wasn't just her power or her divine beauty. It was this, the way she moved through the wild places with such confidence and grace. The way she spoke about nature with reverence and respect. The way she focused entirely on the present moment, free from the politics and drama of the Olympian court. Here, in the forest, Artemis was in her element, and she was magnificent. You're getting the hang of it, she said after I managed to hit 3 trees in a row. Your form still needs work, but the fundamentals are there. With practice, you could become a decent archer. High praise from the goddess of the hunt, I said with a grin. She rolled her eyes, but didn't disagree. Come on, I want to show you something. She led me deeper into the forest, moving so quietly, I felt like a lumbering elephant in comparison. My divine heritage gave me better coordination than a mortal, but Artemis had millennia of practice. She barely disturbed a leaf as she walked. We emerged into a clearing where a stream cut through the forest, creating a small pool of crystal clear water. Deer were drinking from the pool, their coats gleaming in the sunlight. They looked up as we approached, but didn't flee. Somehow, they recognized Artemis and knew they were safe in her presence. This is my favorite spot on Olympus, Artemis said quietly, watching the deer with a soft expression I hadn't seen from her before. It reminds me why I do what I do. The wild places need a protector. The innocent creatures need a guardian. And the world needs places like this, where the chaos of civilization can't reach. I watched the deer, understanding what she meant. There was something pure about this place, unspoiled, real in a way that the marble and gold of the palace could never be. It's beautiful, I said honestly. It is. She turned to look at me, her silver eyes searching. Most gods don't understand this. They see the wild places as resources to exploit or dangers to control. They don't understand that some things are meant to remain free and untamed. There was a weight to her words, a test maybe, or a challenge. I think I understand, I said slowly. Or at least, I'm beginning to. Everything on Olympus is so controlled, so perfect. Even the gardens are carefully maintained and sculpted. But this is real, raw, honest. No pretense, no politics. Artemis nodded slowly. Yes, exactly that. She sat down on a fallen log by the water's edge, gesturing for me to join her. You continue to surprise me, Perseus. I came into this expecting to find another Zeus, arrogant, entitled, thinking the world exists for his amusement. But you're not like that. I'm trying not to be, I said, sitting beside her. I've seen what that kind of attitude does to people. I don't want to become that. The fact that you worry about it is a good sign, Artemis said. She picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water. Do you know why I took an oath of eternal maidenhood? I have some idea, I said carefully. You've seen the worst of what happens when gods abuse their power, especially in relationships. That's part of it, she agreed. I watched my father chase after every beautiful woman he saw, never caring about the consequences. I watched Hera's pain turn into rage directed at innocence. I watched male gods and heroes take what they wanted without thought for consent or consequences. She skipped another stone, harder this time. But it's more than that. I took my oath because I wanted to prove something. That a goddess could be powerful without a consort. That I could protect others without needing anyone to protect me. That my worth wasn't determined by any man's approval or desire. That sounds lonely, I said quietly. She glanced at me sharply, then her expression softened. Sometimes it is, but it's also freeing. I make my own choices. I answer to no one but myself and Olympus. My power is mine alone. I respect that, I said, and I respect you for it. The world needs examples of strength that don't conform to traditional expectations. Artemis studied me for a long moment. You say that now, but what about when you're older, when you come into your full power, when goddesses are throwing themselves at you because you're the heir of Olympus and you look like, well, like that? She gestured at my face. Will you still respect my oath then? Or will you become just another entitled god who thinks every maiden goddess is a challenge to overcome? And there it was, the real test. The core question that would determine whether Artemis could ever trust me. I thought about my answer carefully, because this mattered. Not just for the quest, not just for gaining a follower, but because Artemis deserved honesty. I can't promise I'll be perfect, I said finally. I'm going to make mistakes, probably a lot of them. And yeah, I might face temptations or situations where I'm tested, but I can promise you this. I will always respect your oath. I will never see you or your hunters as challenges to overcome or prizes to win. Your choices are your own, and they're valid regardless of what I or any other male god thinks about them. I met her silver eyes directly, and beyond that, I want to be someone you can count on. Not as a romantic interest or a suitor, but as an ally. As someone who supports what you do and helps protect the things you care about. if you'll let me. Artemis stared at me for so long I started to worry I'd said something wrong. Then, slowly, she smiled. It was a small smile, guarded, but genuine. You know what the really annoying thing is? She said. I actually believe you. Against my better judgment, against all my experience with male gods, I actually think you mean what you're saying. I do, I said simply. She shook her head, but she was still smiling. This is either going to be the start of a great friendship or the biggest mistake I've made in centuries. I'm voting for the first option. We'll see. She stood up, brushing off her pants. Come on. There's one more thing I want to show you before we head back. I followed her around the pool and into the trees on the far side. The forest grew denser here, the canopy so thick it blocked out most of the sunlight. It should have felt oppressive, but instead it felt sacred, like walking into a cathedral made of living wood. We emerged into another clearing, but this one was different. In the center stood a massive oak tree, easily 100 feet tall, its branches spreading out like a canopy over the entire space. The tree radiated power, old power, the kind that had existed since the world was young. This is the heart oak, Artemis said quietly, one of the oldest living things on Olympus. It was here before the gods claimed this mountain, before the Titans, maybe even before the primordials. It's sacred to the wild places, to the hunt, to the untamed aspects of nature. She approached the tree and placed her hand on the trunk. Very few people know about this place. My hunters know, of course. And Hestia, because she understands the importance of sacred spaces. But otherwise, it's a secret. Why show me? I asked. She turned to look at me, her expression serious. Because I need to know if I can trust you. Really trust you. And the heart oak can see through lies and pretense. It knows the true nature of those who stand before it. Oh. Oh no. This was a test. But not one I could prepare for or game. The tree would see me for what I really was. Reincarnated soul, system user, someone with ulterior motives mixed with genuine intentions. Approach the tree, Artemis commanded. Place your hand on the trunk and let it see your heart. I swallowed hard, but did as she asked. What choice did I have? If I refused, she'd never trust me. And if I tried to fake it, well, apparently the tree would know. I crossed the clearing on legs that felt unsteady and placed my hand on the rough bark of the heart oak. The world exploded with sensation. I felt the tree's consciousness brush against mine, ancient and vast and utterly alien. It wasn't examining me so much as looking through me, seeing every layer, every secret, every hidden truth. I felt it see my past life, my death, my reincarnation. It saw the system, saw my quest to gain followers, saw my ultimate goal of breaking free from my parents' protection. But it also saw deeper. It saw the loneliness I'd felt in my first life. It saw my genuine desire to be better, to matter, to make a difference. It saw my respect for Artemis, my affection for Hestia, my determination to prove myself worthy of this second chance. It saw all of me, the good, the bad, the self-serving, and the noble. Everything laid bare before an intelligence that had existed since the dawn of time. And then it withdrew. I stumbled back, gasping for breath. My hand was shaking where I touched the tree. That had been intense, like having your soul turned inside out and examined from every angle. Artemis was watching me with concern. Are you all right? You look like you were in pain. I'm fine, I managed. Just, that was a lot. She turned to the tree, and I saw her eyes widen, The trunk of the hard oak was glowing softly where I touched it. Symbols that I didn't recognize were appearing in the bark, pulsing with gentle green light. Blessed, Artemis whispered. The heart oak has blessed you. That's Perseus. That almost never happens. The tree is incredibly selective about who it accepts. Most people it simply tolerates. But a blessing? That means it saw your heart and deemed you worthy. She turned to me, and for the first time since I'd met her, there was no suspicion in her eyes, just wonder and cautious acceptance. I don't know who you really are, Perseus. I don't know what secrets you carry or what your true nature is. But if the heart oak has blessed you, then there's something genuine in your heart, something worth believing in. The system chimed, loud and bright. Major achievement unlocked. Artemis Trust Arnid. The maiden goddess has accepted you as an I. Follower AC acquired 2/10. +1, 000 worship points as daily. Special benefit unlocked. Hunter's friendship. You have gained the respect of Artemis and her hunters. They will not oppose you and may offer it in times of need. Additional benefit, improved wilderness survival skills. Your time with Artemis has granted you advanced tracking, archery, and forest navigation abilities. I felt power flow into me as the notification faded. Not a lot, not compared to what I'd eventually gain, but enough to notice. My senses sharpened. The forest around me came into clearer focus. I could hear individual birds in the canopy, smell the different plants, sense the small animals moving through the underbrush. And standing before me, smiling that rare, genuine smile, was Artemis, the untouchable huntress, the goddess who'd sworn off all male gods, and she'd just become my second follower. Thank you, I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being, for giving me a chance, for testing me, for showing me this place. Thank you for proving me wrong, Artemis replied, or at least for proving that not all male gods are irredeemable. She reached out and gripped my forearm in the way warriors greet each other. You have my respect, Perseus. Don't make me regret giving it to you. I won't, I promised. She released my arm and stepped back. We should head back. My hunters will be wondering where I am, and I'm sure your parents are having conniptions about you being gone for so long without supervision. I groaned. She was probably right. Zeus and Hera were likely freaking out right about now. We made our way back through the forest together, the tension that had existed between us before now replaced with something more comfortable. Not quite friendship yet, but the beginning of it. Trust. Cautiously given, but genuinely meant. As we emerged from the tree line back into the grounds of Olympus proper, Artemis paused. Perseus? One more thing. Yes? I meant what I said. You have my respect. But I'm watching you. If you prove me wrong, if you become like the other male gods, if you abuse the trust I've given you. Her silver eyes hardened. I will hunt you down myself, and I never miss. Despite the threat, I smiled, because this was Artemis being genuine, showing me that her trust came with expectations and consequences. Understood, I said. I won't let you down. She nodded once, then transformed in a shimmer of silver light. Where the young girl had stood, a massive wolf now sat, all silver fur and intelligent eyes. The wolf looked at me once more, then bounded off toward the woods, disappearing into the trees with supernatural speed. I stood there for a moment, processing everything that had just happened. In the span of a few hours, I'd found peace with Hestia by the hearth and earned the trust of Artemis in the wild. 2 goddesses, 2 followers, two genuine connections that went beyond the system's mechanics. And the day wasn't even over yet. The system was displaying my updated status. Quest Plus, first impressions. Current progress, 2/10 followers acquired. Total daily worship points, 2,000. Current total word points is 2,000. Potential followers identified, 5. Paid tuna, 75% conversion probability. Aphrodite, 60% conversion probability. Apollo, 45% conversion probability. Hermes, 40% conversion probability. Hephaestus, 35% conversion probability. I was making progress, faster than I had expected, honestly. At this rate, I'd complete my quest within a few days, unlock the advanced store features, and have enough worship points to make my first real purchase. But as I made my way back toward the palace, I found myself thinking less about the system and more about the goddesses I'd spent time with. Hestia's warmth, her unconditional acceptance. Artemis's fierce independence, her cautious trust. These weren't just followers or sources of power, they were people. Complicated, ancient, powerful people with their own hopes and fears and dreams. And they'd chosen to believe in me. That meant something. More than points, more than quests, more than any purchasability from the store. It meant I had a responsibility to be worthy of that belief, to prove that their trust wasn't misplaced. As I entered the palace and headed toward my chambers, I made a silent promise to myself. I would gain the power I needed to break free from my parents' gilded cage. I would complete my quests and buy abilities from the store and become strong enough to forge my own path. But I would never forget that the real power came from the connections I made, the trust I earned, and the relationships I built. The half-blood prince was playing the game, yes, but he was also learning to be something more than just a player. He was learning to be someone worth following. Episode 4, Chapter 4, A Divine Quest. I woke up the next morning to find my system going absolutely insane. Not literally insane, obviously. It was still just a bunch of floating blue screens visible only to me. But the notification alerts were pinging with an urgency I hadn't seen before, flashing in the corner of my vision with enough intensity to drag me out of sleep. I sat up in bed, rubbing my eyes, and focused on the main notification. New quest availables. Trial of the Mind. Quest. System ISU'd Challenge. Difficulty. Moderate. Objective. A challenge has been arranged to test your intellectual capabilities. Complete the trial to prove you are more than just a pretty face. Reward. 5,000 worship points. Skill unlock. Tactical genius. Passive. Significant increase in Athena's follower conversion rate. Time limit. 24 hours. Failure penalty. Asif Athena as potential follower. Reputation damage among Olyakians. Accept? Yes/no. I stared at the notification, my sleep-fogged brain slowly processing the information. A challenge to test my intellectual capabilities? Arranged by whom? And why did the system suddenly decide I needed to prove my intelligence? Actually, scratch that. I knew exactly why. Yesterday had been all about charm and emotional connections. I'd won over Hestia with sincerity and Artemis with respect and authenticity. But Athena, the goddess of wisdom, wasn't going to follow me just because I had a pretty face and said nice things. She needed proof that I actually had a functioning brain. And apparently, the system had decided to help me provide that proof. I selected yes, because what else was I going to do? Pass up 5,000 worship points and a passive skill called Tactical Genius? Not to mention the chance to finally convert Athena into a follower. She was at 75% conversion probability, according to my last status check. This quest could push her over the edge. The notification shifted, providing more details. Cozepted, Trial of the Mind. Report to the Garden of Emimenisne at sunrise. The challenge will be issued by Zeus, the canon of intellect and foresight. Note, this is a public trial. Your performance will be observed by multiple Olympians. Additional note, don't embarrass yourself. The system can only give you opportunities. Whether you succeed is up to you. Thanks for the vote of confidence, system. I dragged myself out of bed and went through my morning routine on autopilot. My chambers on Olympus were ridiculously luxurious. The bathroom alone was larger than my entire apartment from my past life, with a bathing pool that was basically a small swimming pool filled with water that was always the perfect temperature. The mirrors were polished bronze that showed my reflection with perfect clarity. And every time I looked at that reflection, I still had to do a double take. Satoru Gojo stared back at me. That impossibly handsome face, those striking blue eyes, the white hair that somehow looked natural and striking at the same time. Even first thing in the morning, I looked like I'd stepped out of an anime. No bedhead, no bags under my eyes, just divine perfection. It was honestly kind of unfair, but I wasn't complaining. I dressed in the clothes that had been laid out for me. Someone, probably one of the palace servants, had left a fresh outfit while I slept. A white chiton with gold trim, sandals that laced up to my knees, and a deep blue himation that could be worn as a cloak. The colors of Zeus, marking me clearly as a sun. By the time I finished getting ready, the sun was just starting to peek over the horizon. The Garden of a Mimosman wasn't far from my chambers. I passed it a few times during my explorations of the palace grounds. It was dedicated to the Titaness of Memory, Mother of the Muses, and it was one of the more peaceful spots on Olympus. Or at least, it usually was. When I arrived at the garden, it looked anything but peaceful. A crowd had already gathered. Not a huge crowd, but enough to make my stomach clench with nerves. I recognized several faces from the Throne Room Council. Athena stood near the front, her gray eyes fixed on the center of the garden where a makeshift arena had been set up. She wore a simple white dress today, her dark hair pulled back in a braid, an expression of cool interest on her face. When she noticed me approaching, she gave a small nod of acknowledgement, but nothing more. Apollo was there too, lounging against a marble pillar with his ever-present sunglasses and a grin that suggested he was here for the entertainment value. Hermes stood beside him, the two gods chatting quietly. Artemis had shown up as well, which surprised me until I remembered that she'd said she'd be watching me. Apparently, she'd meant it literally. Even Hestia was there, sitting on a simple wooden bench near the back, offering me an encouraging smile when our eyes met. That helped settle my nerves a bit. At least I had some people in my corner. And then, there was the Titan. Koya stood in the center of the garden, and he was impressive in the way that only ancient beings could be. Tall, easily 8 feet, with silver hair that fell to his shoulders and eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies. He wore robes of deep blue covered in celestial patterns, stars and moons, and planetary orbits embroidered in silver thread. The air around him shimmered with intellectual energy, like standing too close to a powerful computer that was processing enormous amounts of data. The Titan of intellect and foresight, one of the original Titans, brother to Kronos, uncle to Zeus. He'd been imprisoned in Tartarus after the Titanomachy, but had been released in recent years as part of some peace treaty I didn't fully understand yet. Now he served as a sort of advisor and teacher to Olympus, sharing his vast knowledge with those deemed worthy. And apparently, he was about to test me. "Ah, the young prince arrives," Koea said, his voice resonating with harmonics that made my teeth ache. It was like listening to someone speak in perfect mathematical ratios, every syllable precisely calculated for maximum impact. Right on time. Punctuality is the first sign of a disciplined mind. I approached the center of the garden, very aware of all the eyes on me. "Lord Koes, I was told you had a challenge for me." Indeed. The Titan studied me with those galactic eyes, and I felt like I was being analyzed at a fundamental level. "Your divine parents speak highly of your potential. Lady Athena has mentioned that you showed promise during your conversation yesterday, and the system that guides you has requested a formal assessment of your intellectual capabilities." Wait, the system had requested this? Could the system actually interact with the world beyond just showing me notifications? That was news to me. "However," Kois continued, "potential means nothing without demonstration. Words are cheap. Anyone can sound intelligent if they've memorized enough philosophy. True wisdom requires the ability to think, to analyze, to solve problems using creativity and logic in equal measure." He gestured, and the space between us shimmered. A three-dimensional projection appeared, floating in the air like a hologram. It showed a complex diagram, something that looked like a mix between a chessboard, a Go board, and something entirely alien. Geometric patterns overlapped with numerical sequences, and symbols I didn't recognize pulsed at various intersections. "This is the labyrinth of thought," Koeas explained, "a puzzle of my own design. It tests not just knowledge, but the ability to synthesize information, recognize patterns, think several steps ahead, and adapt to changing circumstances. In short, it tests every aspect of intellectual prowess." The crowd murmured with interest. I saw Athena lean forward slightly, her gray eyes intent on the projection. "The rules are simple," Koei said. "I will make moves on the board. You must counter each move and work toward the objective, which is to reach the center of the labyrinth. However, the labyrinth changes based on the moves made. Every action has consequences. Every choice opens some paths while closing others. And throughout the challenge, I will pose questions. Answer incorrectly, and you'll lose ground. Answer correctly, and you'll gain advantages." He smiled, and it was not a comforting expression. Most challengers fail within 10 moves. The record for a god to reach the center is 47 moves, held by Lady Athena herself. Mortals have never succeeded at all. "Great. No pressure or anything. Do you accept the challenge, Perseus, son of Zeus?" Coeus asked formally. The system chimed. "This is it. This is your moment to prove your intellectual worth. Remember, you have the memories and knowledge of 2 lifetimes. Use them." I took a deep breath and nodded. "I accept." "Excellent." Coeus raised his hand, and the projection expanded, becoming fully 3-dimensional and interactive. The board was now large enough that I could see every detail. It was even more complex than I initially thought. Multiple layers, each one representing a different plane of logic or reasoning. Connections between points that followed rules I'd have to figure out as I went. "We begin," Coeus declared. The Titan made the first move. A silver piece appeared on one of the outer edges of the board, and immediately, portions of the labyrinth shifted. Walls appeared in some areas, paths opened in others. The pattern that had seemed random before now showed the beginnings of structure. And then Koe spoke his first question. What is the nature of wisdom? Is it the accumulation of knowledge, the application of experience, or something else entirely? Oh, he was starting with philosophy. Okay, I can work with that. I studied the board while I formulated my answer. In my past life, I'd consumed countless anime and manga, many of which dealt with philosophical concepts. Naruto had explored the nature of peace and hatred. Full Metal Alchemist had examined equivalent exchange and the value of human life. Code Geass had questioned whether the ends justified the means. And more than that, I'd spent 2 hours yesterday talking philosophy with Athena herself. I'd learned how she thought about these concepts. Wisdom is neither knowledge nor experience alone, I said, making my first move on the board. I placed the golden piece opposite his silver one, following what I hoped was a logical counter. Wisdom is the ability to apply knowledge and experience to new situations in ways that lead to good outcomes. It's knowledge plus understanding plus judgment. Koeis tilted his head, considering. Adequate. You may advance 3 spaces. The board shifted again, and my piece moved forward. New paths opened up. The right answer, because there wasn't one. It was about how I approached the dilemma. I studied the board, seeing how his last move had created a fork in my available paths. One route was direct but narrow, the other was longer but offered more flexibility. I pull the lever, I said, making my move to follow the longer path. Not because one life is worth less than 5, but because inaction in the face of preventable harm is itself a choice. The moral weight exists regardless. At least by acting, I'm taking responsibility for the outcome rather than hiding behind the excuse of non-interference. Interesting, Koei said, and I thought I detected approval in his tone. You prioritize action over passivity. Advance 4 spaces. The board shifted again. We were about 10 moves in now, and I was starting to get a feel for how it worked. The labyrinth wasn't random. It responded to the logic of the answers, the confidence of the moves, the coherence of the overall strategy. And I was beginning to form a strategy. In my past life, I'd been obsessed with Death Note. I'd watched Light and L play their cat and mouse games, each one thinking several steps ahead, setting traps within traps. I'd analyzed their strategies, their psychological manipulation, their ability to predict their opponent's moves. This was similar. Quest wasn't just testing my knowledge, he was testing my ability to think strategically, to plan ahead, to adapt to changing circumstances. So I needed to stop reacting and start predicting. The next several moves were a blur of questions and answers, moves and countermoves. Coeus asked about mathematics, about logic, about ethics and epistemology and metaphysics. He threw riddles at me, some classical and some of his own design. He presented scenarios that had no clear right answer, just different shades of gray. And I drew on everything I had. My education from my past life, the philosophy I'd discussed with Athena, the strategic thinking I'd learned from anime protagonists, the memories inherited from my current life as Perseus. If you have a boat that you gradually replace one plank at a time until none of the original material remains, is it still the same boat? The identity persists through continuity of function and purpose, not material composition. The boat is defined by what it does and what it means to those who use it. Advance 5 spaces. A god and a mortal perform the same good deed. Is the moral value of the action the same? The value of the action is the same, but the moral significance differs. The mortal acts with uncertainty and limited power, making their choice to do good more meaningful. The god acts from a position of security and vast power, making their choice less costly. Morality is measured not just by the act, but by what it costs the actor. Well reasoned. Advance 6 spaces. Around move 20, I noticed the crowd had grown larger. More gods had shown up to watch. I caught glimpses of them in my peripheral vision. Apollo was no longer grinning, but watching with genuine interest. Artemis had moved closer, her silver eyes tracking every move. And Athena? Athena was completely focused on the board, her expression intense. Coeus made his 25th move, and the question that followed was different. You face an opponent who is stronger, faster, and more experienced than you. The battle is inevitable. How do you win? This wasn't philosophy. This was strategy. And suddenly, I understood. The questions were changing because the challenge was escalating. Coeus was moving from testing my philosophical knowledge to testing my tactical thinking. And tactical thinking? That was something I actually had experience with. I studied the board, seeing the trap he'd laid. His last move had created what looked like an advantageous opening, a shortcut toward the center. But if I took it, I'd be leaving my flank exposed. He could cut off my retreat in 3 moves. You don't fight the battle your opponent wants you to fight, I said, making a move that avoided the shortcut and instead reinforced my position. You change the battlefield. Find terrain that negates their advantages. Force them to fight on your terms. And if you can't win through direct confrontation, you win through attrition, deception, or by turning their strength into weakness. The board shifted. My piece didn't advance as far this time, only 2 spaces. But the paths that opened up were more numerous and more flexible. I traded immediate progress for strategic positioning. Coeus's eyes gleamed. You think like a general, not a warrior. Advance 2 spaces and gain the ability to see 3 moves ahead. Wait, what? Suddenly, the board changed in my perception. I could see ghosted images of potential future moves, branching paths of possibility. It was like the labyrinth had become partially transparent, showing me likely outcomes of different choices. This was huge. This changed everything. A city is under siege, Coeus continued, making his next move. You have limited supplies, and a spy has infiltrated your ranks. You don't know who the spy is. The enemy offers terms. Surrender 1 citizen of your choice to be executed, and to lift the siege. Refuse, and everyone starves. What do you do? This was the kind of question that had no good answer. Every choice led to suffering. But that was the point. Leadership often meant choosing between bad options and worse options. I studied the board, using my new ability to see ahead. I could see that Coeus was setting up for a major offensive, planning to trap me in a corner of the board where my options would become severely limited. But if I could disrupt his setup now, while I had the ability to see it coming, I could throw off his entire strategy. I refused the terms, I said, making a move that looked defensive but was actually setting up a counteroffensive. Not out of idealism, but because accepting the enemy's terms gives them control of the situation. Instead, I used the time to find the spy through careful observation and deduction. I rationed supplies intelligently. I looked for a third option beyond surrender or starvation, and if necessary, I prepared the city for a breakout assault that forces the enemy to lift the siege on their own. Coeus stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. Actually smiled. You refuse to accept the premise of the question. You seek victory conditions beyond those presented. Advance 7 spaces. The board shifted dramatically. I was now past the halfway point, deeper into the labyrinth than most challengers ever got. The crowd was murmuring now. I heard Apollo whistle appreciatively. Hermes was grinning. And Athena? Athena was standing now, moving closer to the board, her gray eyes alight with something I couldn't quite identify. Interest? Excitement? Respect? Impressive, Koei said, and his voice carried to the entire crowd. You've surpassed the point where most gods fail. Your ability to synthesize philosophical reasoning with strategic thinking is rare. Shall we see how far you can go? The challenges came faster now. Questions about game theory, about probability, about chaos theory and emergent systems. Koei was throwing everything at me, testing the limits of my knowledge and adaptability. And I was keeping up. Every anime I'd ever watched, every strategy game I'd ever played, every book I'd ever read in my past life was flooding back to me. I pulled strategies from Code Geass, tactical thinking from Legend of the Galactic Heroes, philosophical frameworks from Full Metal Alchemist. I combined them with the knowledge from my current life, the understanding of divine politics and mythological patterns. It was like my brain had shifted into overdrive, making connections I'd never seen before, finding patterns in the chaos of the labyrinth. Move 35. Move 40. I was approaching Athena's record. The crowd had gone silent, watching with rapt attention. Every god present understood the significance. If I could match or surpass the goddess of wisdom's own record on my first attempt, it would be a statement. Proof that I was more than just the pretty-faced heir of Olympus. Move 45. The center of the labyrinth was in sight now. Just 2 more layers to go. But Koei wasn't making it easy. His questions had become wickedly complex, requiring me to draw on every scrap of knowledge and intuition I possessed. Final question, Koei announced, making his 46th move. The board shifted one last time, creating a direct path to the center. But it was blocked by a single barrier, pulsing with energy. To pass this barrier, you must answer correctly. There is no partial credit, no philosophical flexibility, only truth or failure. The garden was dead silent. Everyone was watching, waiting. The question, Koei said, his voice resonating with power, is this. What is the fundamental difference between knowledge and wisdom? I stared at the board, at the pulsing barrier, at the center that was so close I could almost touch it. This was it, the final test. And Koei had said there was only one right answer. What was the fundamental difference between knowledge and wisdom? I thought back to my conversation with Athena, to my time with Hestia by the hearth, to my experience with Artemis in the wild. Each goddess had taught me something different, shown me different aspects of truth and understanding. Knowledge was information, facts, data, experiences accumulated over time. But wisdom was something else. And suddenly, I knew. Knowledge is knowing what is, I said clearly, making my final move. Wisdom is understanding what should be done with that knowledge. Knowledge is the map, wisdom is knowing which path to take. Knowledge can be taught and transferred. Wisdom must be earned through experience, reflection, and the courage to act on understanding even when the outcome is uncertain. I paused, meeting Koei's galactic eyes. Knowledge tells you that fire burns. Wisdom tells you when to use fire to warm your home and when to let it go out before it consumes everything you love. Knowledge is the tool. Wisdom is knowing how to use it. The barrier pulsed once, twice. Then it shattered. My piece shot forward, reaching the center of the labyrinth in a blaze of golden light. The entire board lit up, geometric patterns resolving into perfect symmetry, chaos becoming order, questions finding answers. And the crowd erupted. Apollo was laughing and applauding. Hermes was shaking his head in amazement. Artemis had a small smile on her face, like she'd known I could do it all along. Hestia was beaming with maternal pride. But it was Athena's reaction that mattered most. The goddess of wisdom stepped forward, approaching the board with an expression I'd never seen on her before. Her gray eyes were shining, and when she looked at me, there was respect there. Real, genuine respect. 47 moves, she said quietly, loud enough for me to hear, but soft enough that it felt private despite the crowd. You matched my record, on your first attempt, using strategies I've never seen before and logic chains I didn't anticipate. She reached out and placed her hand on the projection, and it shimmered, showing a replay of the entire game. You didn't just solve the labyrinth through knowledge. You adapted. You learned the rules as you went, recognized patterns, predicted outcomes, and thought several steps ahead. You combined philosophical reasoning with tactical strategy in ways that shouldn't work but somehow did. Athena turned to face me fully, and there was something in her expression that made my heart race. Perseus, son of Zeus and Hera, you have impressed me, truly impressed me. I have tested countless heroes and gods over the millennia, and few have shown the intellectual prowess you've demonstrated today. The system chimed, loud and triumphant. Quest complete. Trial of the mind. Reward you locked. +5. 000 worship points S. Current hold 7,000 worship points. Effect: advanced pattern recognition, improved strategic planning, ability to analyze complex situations and predict outcomes with increased accuracy. Major achievement: Athena fully impressed. Follower acquired. 3/10. Athena, goddess of wisdom, has become your follower. +1. 000 work points S daily. Special benefit: access to the libraries of Athena. Additional benefit: Athena will provide hecatonicals and support your endeavors. I felt power surge through me as the notifications faded. It was different from before. Not just raw divine energy, but something more refined. My thoughts felt clearer, faster. I could look at the crowd around me and instantly read their body language, predict their reactions, understand the social dynamics at play. The tactical genius skill was already active, and it was incredible. But more important than the system rewards was the goddess standing in front of me. Thank you, Lady Athena, I said, bowing respectfully. Your record was an inspiration. I'm honored to have matched it. Matched it, Coes interjected, his voice carrying across the garden, but not surpassed it. Though I must say, young prince, you came closer than anyone has in centuries. Had you taken the shortcut I offered at move 25, you would have failed spectacularly. But you recognized the trap and chose the longer, more strategic path. That decision showed wisdom beyond your years. The Titan approached me, and up close, his presence was even more overwhelming. You have proven yourself intellectually capable, Perseus. I will report to the Olympian Council that the heir to the throne possesses not just divine power and physical potential, but a keen mind as well. That is a rare combination. He turned to address the crowd. Let it be known that Perseus, son of Zeus, has completed the labyrinth of thought in 47 moves, matching the record held by Lady Athena herself. He has demonstrated philosophical understanding, strategic acumen, and intellectual adaptability worthy of his station. I declare this trial complete and successfully passed. The crowd applauded again, more formally this time. It was an acknowledgement, a recognition of achievement. I'd proven myself in front of some of the most powerful beings in existence. As the crowd began to disperse, Apollo sauntered over, his grin back in full force. Not bad, cousin. I especially liked the part where you turned Coeus' trap at move 25 into a strategic advantage at move 30. That was slick. You were watching that closely? I asked. Of course. Intellectual contests aren't usually my thing, but that was actually entertaining. Plus, I went to bed with Hermes. He thought you'd fold by move 30. Hermes appeared beside his half-brother, somehow moving from across the garden to right next to us in the blink of an eye. In my defense, most gods fold by move 30. You exceeded expectations, Perseus. Color me impressed. Artemis joined us next, her silver eyes assessings. You did well, though I noticed you borrowed some hunting strategies in your responses, particularly the one about changing the battlefield to negate your opponent's advantages. I learned from the best, I said with a slight smile. She actually smiled back. Perhaps you did. Hestia was the last to approach, and she wrapped me in a warm hug that smelled like home and fresh bread. I knew you could do it, dear one. Your heart is strong, but your mind is sharp as well. That is a powerful combination. Thank you, Hestia, for believing in me. Always, she said simply, then stepped back with a knowing look. Though I think someone else wants to speak with you. She gestured toward Athena, who was standing slightly apart from the group, clearly waiting for the others to finish their congratulations. The goddess of wisdom looked patient, but there was an intensity in her gaze that suggested our conversation was going to be important. The other gods took the hint and dispersed, offering final words of congratulations as they left. Within a few minutes, it was just me and Athena in the garden, the morning sun casting long shadows through the columns. Walk with me, Athena said. Not quite a request and not quite a command. I fell into step beside her as she led me deeper into the garden, away from the main paths. We walked in silence for a while, and I didn't push. I had learned that when Athena wanted to say something, she'd say it in her own time. Finally, she spoke. You surprised me today, Perseus. That doesn't happen often. I'm honored, I said honestly. I've been watching you since you arrived on Olympus, she continued, her gray eyes fixed ahead as we walked. Your conversation with me yesterday showed promise. Your interactions with Hestia and Artemis showed emotional intelligence and respect. But I needed to know if you had the intellectual capacity to match. She paused by a small fountain, studying the water as it cascaded down carved marble. There have been many powerful gods throughout history. Strength is common among our kind. But true intelligence, strategic thinking combined with philosophical understanding, that is rare. My father has it when he chooses to use it. I have it. Very few others can claim the same. Athena turned to face me. But you, Perseus, you demonstrated something today that I haven't seen in a very long time. Not just intelligence, but adaptability. The ability to synthesize different types of knowledge into coherent strategies. To think several steps ahead while remaining flexible enough to change course when needed. To draw on unconventional sources of wisdom and apply them in creative ways. Include. Plus. She stepped closer, and I could see the starlight reflecting in her eyes. Where did you learn to think like that? Your strategies in the trial were unlike anything I've encountered before. They felt almost alien, as if drawn from a completely different system of thought. My heart skipped a beat. Had I been too obvious about using anime strategies? Did she suspect something about my reincarnation? I've always been fascinated by stories, I said carefully. Which was technically true. Tales of heroes and their battles, both physical and intellectual. I study them, analyze their strategies, try to understand what made them successful or what led to their failures. And I suppose I've developed my own approach by combining elements from many different sources. Athena studied me for a long moment, her gray eyes searching. Then she nodded slowly. That explanation makes sense. A good strategist learns from every source available, no matter how unconventional. I approve of your methodology. She reached into a fold of her dress and pulled out a small bronze key, intricate and beautiful. This is the key to my personal library, the greatest collection of knowledge in all of Olympus, surpassing even the archives of the Muses. I'm granting you unlimited access. I stared at the key, understanding the significance of what she was offering. Athena's library was legendary. It contained not just books, but divine knowledge, strategic treatises written by the greatest minds in history, philosophical texts that had shaped civilizations. Lady Athena, I don't know what to say. This is an incredible honor. You've earned it, she said simply, pressing the key into my hand. But more than that, I want you to use it. Learn everything you can. Grow that mind of yours. Because I have a feeling you're going to need every advantage you can get for what's coming. What's coming? I asked, picking up on the ominous tone. Athena's expression grew serious. The world is changing, Perseus. Powers that have been dormant for millennia are beginning to stir. The old order is shifting, and when it shifts, there will be conflict. You are uniquely positioned to play a major role in what's to come, whether you intend to or not. She placed a hand on my shoulder, and I felt her divine presence, vast and ancient and possibly wise. I'm choosing to support you, not because you're the heir of Olympus or because your parents asked me to, but because I've looked into your eyes, tested your mind, and seen potential for greatness. The kind of greatness that shapes ages. The system chimed again, almost reverently. Athenai's bond depend. Follow her loyalty. Maximum. Special benefit advanced. Athena will now actively mentor you in strategy and wisdom. Additional benefit, you've gained a powerful ally who will support your goals and defend you from threats. I won't let you down, I promised, meaning every word. I know, Athena said with a slight smile, because if I thought you would, I wouldn't be making this investment. Now come, let me show you the library. We have much to discuss, and your education is just beginning. She led me from the garden toward a section of Olympus I'd never visited before. As we walked, I felt the weight of what had just happened settling over me. 3 followers now. Hestia, Artemis, and Athena. 3 of the most powerful and respected goddesses on Olympus had chosen to believe in me. And I was accumulating worship points at a rate of 3,000 per day now. In less than 3 days, I'd have enough to make my first major purchase from the Divine Store. A weapon, an ability, something that would give me an edge. But more important than the points or the powers was the realization that I was building something real here. These weren't just followers in a game. They were allies, mentors, friends. Goddesses who saw something in me worth nurturing and protecting. As we entered the library, and I saw shelf after shelf of ancient texts, scrolls that glowed with preserved wisdom, and artifacts that hummed with stored knowledge, I understood the true gift Athena had given me. Not just access to information, but the opportunity to become something more than I currently was. To learn, to grow, to develop into the kind of leader, strategist, and god that these powerful beings believed I could become. The Half-Blood Prince had just leveled up in a major way, and the game was only getting started.